presenting in Canva. You're here today with me, Sharon Redmon, and I am an assistive technology specialist and also a special education classroom teacher. And we're here today to talk about the crowd in the car in action. Last week, I talked a lot about schema and STEAM and STEM activities and how we build vocabulary. And today we're taking all of what we did last week in building that vocabulary and really working hard on that upper rope and we're of Scarborough's rope. We're going to see that in a little bit. And then talking about now how we put all of that work into active participation in shared and interactive book reading. So I'm excited for us to be here today and to so I can show you some of the activities that we do, some of the things that I have done that don't work, and some of the things that I have found that do work. So let's get to it. So just some financial disclosures here, and then I'm gonna keep going on. So here's what we're gonna want to get this up. I know I'm sharing my screen. Here we go. Okay, so today we're going to be exploring together how to, and hopefully by the end of this webinar, you're going to be able to understand and describe what that acronym means, and also crowd. What does that crowd, and how does crowd fit into car, right? How can you make that happen? And we're going to state some importance of modeling assistive technology to our AAC users and our AT users. When they have our students have accommodations on their IEPs that use assistive technology tools such as text-to-speech or masking or any of the other tools that we can provide our users. If we don't teach them how to use them and model how to use them, then it becomes really difficult for them to use. They don't know when or how or why those tools are important and can help them with reading and accessing their general education curriculum, which is all about what our accommodations are for, right? So we're also, hopefully you will see how you can bring in meaningful activities and resources to increase that reading engagement, because kids love to read when they're excited. Kids love to participate when they're excited, when they're invested in the materials. So creating that initial excitement is going to be very important. Okay, so we are going, I'm just going to try to hide this. There we go. Okay, trying to hide that floating meeting control panel. So here we talked earlier just a little bit, touched on Scarborough's reading room, and this is from the Science of Reading. And we know, I don't want to take a lot of time actually to talk about this. We talked about it in length the last webinar last week, so go back and check that out. But I do want to just kind of make sure that we all have some of that same language as we're going forward. And so the Scarborough's reading rope is from that Science of Reading, which is where we're at right now. And we understand that this rope is that reading is complicated and writing is complicated, and all these strands are interwoven. So when you're looking at reading, listening, writing, all of those, and speaking, all of those strands are really interconnected. And so we're just pulling apart these strands just a little bit. We're not going to break the rope, as my image suggests, but we're just pulling them apart so that we can kind of come in and zoom in on one aspect. Last week, we looked at this upper strand of this language comprehension, and we're going to continue with that today, of just that vocabulary and building that schema and that background knowledge. And so now we have all of that. How can we go about looking at that kind of verbal reasoning, looking at literacy knowledge, concepts of print, really kind of bringing some of all of that together so that that language comprehension or comprehension of what we're reading, the whole point of reading, that we can access that. So we're going to continue to stay on this upper part of the rope. And with that, again, like I said, it's all interconnected. It doesn't mean that we're not going to necessarily talk about phonological awareness of the lower part, that word recognition part, but we're just kind of stretching it apart just a little bit so that we can just focus on that piece, on that upper part of the language comprehension. Okay, everyone knows that the Bible of our literacy instruction, comprehensive literacy for all, teaching students with significant disabilities to read and write, from Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver. What we're talking about today comes right out of the research, right out of evidence-based practices. And we're really focusing on these pages on chapter 4 between pages 51 and 62. And I have read these pages over and over and over again. And it's interesting, I feel that every time I go back to that book, I pick out something new, and I pick out, like, I always have an aha moment. And I have read it so many times. And that happened to me last night as I was just kind of going back, and I wanted to make sure that I had all the pieces I really wanted to use and talk with you guys today about. And then I found the one piece of crowd that I felt like I was missing. And I just had this major aha moment and tried it out today in my own practice, and everything fell into place. So it's so important to continue to use that book as a resource. If you haven't read that book, please go and buy it. And then if you want to do a book, kind of a study with that, SETC has recorded webinar chapters that they did as a book study. I think that was last year or the year before. So if you wanted to kind of have that to go along as a companion of you reading, do that. It's really important. There's also many more resources that I'll be sharing today that talks about specific parts, especially when we come to shared reading. So huge, important book, changed my teaching career and it changed how I organized my literacy and writing, my ELA, and even really some of my math for my students that have complex needs and complex communication needs and complex bodies. So here we are, shared reading. This is what we're talking about. We're pulling that apart, taking that little, zooming in on that part of that rope. And we know that this is so important, the shared reading, this interaction that occurs between adults and students, grandma and grandpa and grandchild, you know, mom and dad and kids, brothers and sisters. I have this beautiful picture that I have on my wall of my, excuse me, my youngest son being read to by my older son, and just this bedtime routine and this time of having that interaction and that intent that happens of enhancing student language and literacy skills. Many times at the time when we're reading to our kids and we're reading to them as babies, we don't think about necessarily that we're enhancing and doing it for the purposes of enhancing language or literacy, but that does occur. And so as teachers, we really want to be more structured oftentimes in this approach to make sure that we have some accountability and that we can really take a look at what we're doing and assess that when we are being reflective in our teaching practices to figure out, did that approach work, or how can I adjust that to make that work for my students? So we know that there are, and what Karen and David talk about in this book is these unstructured and structured approaches. And and we're going to be talking mostly about this structured approach, which is the car and the crowd, or the crowd and putting the crowd back into the car. But I do want to just talk about this little piece that in this book that talks about that unstructured approach. And And why I wanted to hit this is because you're going to see a video later on with a student of mine in the past who had Rett syndrome. And it just, when I read the piece in this Comprehensive Literacy for All book again last night about the research that was done of looking at reading storybook interactions between parents and their children who have Rett syndrome, and how that unstructured approach increased engagement, it increased commenting, it increased responding more frequently with their communication devices. So even using that unstructured approach, and when I started kind of looking at the more structured part of this approach to shared reading, using CAR and using the crowd, I definitely noticed like, oh, I do that. Like, I do that all the time. I naturally do that. So that felt reassuring, but what I feel like the structured piece gave me was definitely that structure, right? To be able to make sure that I'm hitting all the pieces that I need, especially when you start breaking out crowd. But going back to that unstructured piece, I loved that what parents were naturally doing when they were reading storybooks with their children with Rett's is that they were, creating and attributing attention to meaning, right? And meaning to all communication attempts, which is so important for our students with significant disabilities. And when we are doing that shared reading, that CAR and that crowd, and making sure that we have time to also wait and pause. I mean, it is the A in CAR, you'll see that, is that wait time, right? But that wait time and intentionality of attributing meaning to all communication attempts, I mean, should be just kind of a theme that runs throughout CAR and crowd as we go. That unstructured approach should be throughout that structured approach. I have my notes sitting right here, paired, had that pairing to communication symbols. They made sure that their child was looking, so having that wait time and looking at their communication symbols, looking at the illustrations in the book, giving them time to get there. As we know with our friends with Rett's, that can be difficult to get them to have that wait time, right? That anxiety builds that they can't get their body to do what they need to do. So having that time. And then that they really found that instead of like asking their child to make a comment by, hit the switch, that by just asking some questions and having conversation and attributing meaning, that they were able to get so much more authentic and really beautiful interactions, and that those interactions increased. Because it's all about the relationship and that interaction. When we do shared reading, we are reading with, we're not reading to, we are reading with our students. And so that's a really big piece. And oftentimes, when we have students that have complex communication needs and complex bodies, that with becomes hard, and it ends up transferring into a reading to rather than a reading with. And this is where the CAR and the crowd is so important. So before we kind of get to the CAR and the crowd and the CAR, the CAR and the crowd, before we get to that, we do want to have something to read. I think it's really important. We talked about motivation and engagement and using authentic text. This book, Comprehensive Literacy for All, changed my life, as I said, in my teaching career. And then when I was creating all these materials and going crazy, then I found the resource of Retopia, which then also made balance in my life, I have to say. So, and I love that there's authentic text. So what you're going to see today is a lot of images from us utilizing this upper elementary of an authentic text that was paired and tied to the Wizard of Oz, of looking at fact and fiction. So these are the shared reading activities or the shared reading interactions that are really intentional within this, within Readtopia. And so you're going to be seeing some of these things as we go through. And then also they have interactive read alouds, and which are also kind of, they're those shared reading pieces that we bring more activities in, and that we are having our students have active participation, right? And so now we're asking and engaging our students in shared reading and interactive read alouds, and we want them to participate. We had to build some of the background knowledge. We had to know where our words were to use words. We had to know where our letters were so that we could say, well, the word I'm thinking about sounds like, it has a k sound, and or it makes a sound that starts with a it meows. Oh, you're talking about the cat. Okay. Yes, that is a lion. It looks like a big cat. Yes, so we can start attributing that meaning. So here are some areas that Readtopia that I pulled from their site that kind of talks about that we work in that picture walk, vocabulary, print referencing. You're going to see examples of this as we go along. So how do we build excitement? Well, I love building excitement by doing STEM activities. And so in here, we were building our vocabulary. This whole first chapter is about tornadoes. So we did a STEM activity about tornadoes. Kids had these tornadoes sitting on their desk as we read through. And of course, as you're going to see, anytime you see this read and write, that is the tool that our district uses. It's a Google extension from Text Help. And so our read and write toolbar is across the top. And then it is a cue to you as well, is to kind of look within the pictures and see. And so right here is where we were having and modeling our read and write tools. So our students were getting excited. We were creating activities. We were bringing the real world connection to them. And we were using our tools, our assistive technology tools as we read. We were building engagement. We were doing some science activities. And I loved this. We did cornstarch in green. This was more towards the end of our unit, where the witch starts melting. And so we were exploring the world melting and what that looked like. And does it bubble? What happens when things melt? And so we did a cornstarch and vinegar experiment. And then just to make it fun, we added green paint into there so that it looked like the green witch was melting. And that builds that excitement, and it builds that engagement that I lean forward and I want to learn, right? I'm moving towards the learning, and kids got really excited. We also built scarecrows, and we also did a play right here. We had 3 Dorothys in our play and presented that to our whole school. So that was a theme throughout all of our units that we did, is we were always building towards this end goal of producing our play. And so all of our set designs, everything that we worked on, a lot of our vocabulary, whether we had it core, but also some fringe vocabulary. This fringe is exciting and it makes us want to use our core. So, and we use those to build that engagement. So now we have our authentic text. We have some of our activities every week of building that engagement, building that background knowledge. And so now it's time to, how do we start participating? How do we start engaging our learners with complex needs, with complex communication needs and complex bodies, right? So this is where following this car is super helpful for that structured activity, right? And so that we can kind of go back and do a mental checklist. Like, did I make a comment? Did I wait? Then did I ask a question when no one participated, right? And then maybe I needed to respond and give some more. So that very 3-prong little quick thing for us is super important. I have this, and you'll have access to the PDF that I have. I have this posted all over our room, because when that shared reading activity happens, whether that's in a group context and we're doing a shared activity or an interactive read aloud, how I want everyone in the room to be able to be on the same page when I talk about, I'm making a comment, I'm going to ask a question, I'm waiting some time, now I'm going to respond, and I'm going to add more to this conversation. So it's such a great framework for us as teachers and therapists and even parents to really kind of give us a space to work within and to say, hey, this is, I can make all these things happen, and I can have this moment with my students or with my child that has complex needs. I can make that happen. So here we have, following the cars, just a few examples of just that. I also put this great video that's in here that you can access later. So it's a YouTube video that I found on shared reading, and gives some wonderful examples of doing the comment, asking, and responding with individuals that use AAC, that have complex communication needs. So I encourage you to go and to read. There's so much out there, but to really look at and find some of those examples. So here we started with, I just wanted to say, we have our read and write. We're using our click to speak tool to read, and we've done a lot of vocabulary work over here on the sign. And then here we're coming in, and as we read, we're starting to make some comments, right? You know, if I was a horse, I would feel. And then kids started giving me some feeling words, and I started writing them down so that everybody could see them. And not that my handwriting or spelling is all that great, but yet that they know that they were being heard, and that we were having that importance on the things that they were sharing and being active participants in them. So here we also do quite a bit of, obviously, teaching and modeling. And here's my friend Callie. And what I wanted to kind of set the stage for the video that you're going to see. My friend Callie here has Rett syndrome. She uses eye gaze. This picture in the middle right here is her low-tech eye gaze system that is color-coded. And so she looks at the group, then she looks at the color that she wants, and that tells us which item within that group she wants. So what we did for her to be, and this is her partner assisted one-page pod book that we used with her as well. So what we did for her to help her be able to engage, we would use the pod for core and talk about core words that we were, and modeling those core words with her. And then when we were wanting to do the car and bring the crowd into the car, well, we needed a way for her to be able to communicate that with us through eye gaze. So she knows the system pretty well of having her eye gaze. These are, you know, there's multiple boards, multiple colors with the whole alphabet, and they're up on an eye gaze frame. And she understands that looking at a group and then looking at the color she wants then tells us what letter it is that she wants. We do this with numbers as well. She's getting really good at it. So what we did is we went ahead and we made some of these where we brought in some of the language that our other students were talking about. You know, we were looking at tornado, we were looking at the word house, that vocabulary, and building that up. We built a tornado. We built a house for the kids. Then we also talked about the good witch and the bad witch because they're characters in our story. And so we wanted to give her access to that. So we have lots of language, not as much as we would if with her letters, but we wanted to do in a field of 4 and give her that language. So what you're going to see in the next slide is us doing that car in the crowd, right? So us doing that comment and waiting, asking a question. I sneak in the crowd part of that completion, or I'm sorry, of that recall, what happened, because we had already read through, we'd already talked about it. And so now we were coming back and doing this again. And so we needed to do a little bit of teaching first and some modeling. And then when we come back, she does some great work. So you're not going to see her, you'll hear me saying where she's looking, but you can't really tell that in the video, but just know that that's happening. Her friend wasn't happy and was getting a little restless with me. And so you'll hear her friend complaining a little bit in the background. So, but I really, and I really feel that it's such a great example of some things that you can do. So, all right, let's take a look at that. So here, actually, crowd, we're going to do this completion, recall, and open-ended questions. Recall is what you're going to see here in just a minute with Callie, where I ask about, like, what happened? What happened? The tornado came, the house fell down. What happened? Right? We also kind of were bridging that where we talk about that tornado because we experienced what that looked like. So lots of different things. I'm going to pause this one. We're going to do this one first.
What happened? What happened? What happened?
I'm using it right now. Get back up again.
Oh, you're looking over here. And then you looked at green. Oh, that told me this one. I don't think that there was anything about a king on there. About him. I don't think we've talked about that. Oh, you looked here, and then you looked at red. That tells me you were looking at this one. A doctor. I don't know if we talked about the doctor. Oh, you looked at this group. Then you looked at this group again. And that tells me about a brain. Maybe you were telling me you think something happened. Oh, you think something happened, and then you went to red. Talking about the heart. Yeah. Let me show you, Callie. The good witch. Something happened to the house. I would look at this group and then look at green. Yes, just like that. Good job with your eyes. That tells me that the house. I would say you're right. What happened? The house fell down. It fell down.
It's trash.
Oh, it is kind of trashed.
So some things that maybe I would do different now is that I would probably try to find more meaning in when she went over and did the queen or the king. And I probably would have said now, like, oh, I saw a crown. I saw a crown. Yeah, kings and queens wear crowns. That was right. That would be so great. I mean, I've watched this so many times and now I'm like, oh, so many things that I would not do again or that I would change, right? So when she went to brain, I had contributed or said, yes, maybe you were thinking about. She went to doctor. Maybe she was thinking, oh no, someone's hurt. You need a doctor. I didn't pick up on that. I didn't pick up on that. So I really needed to have more faith and more belief in my student that she was really talking and making comments about what she was thinking and not necessarily always, you know, thinking that the only right answer was talking about the section that had the house and, you know, this page, the house and the tornado and all this vocabulary that we had been working on. I really wanted her and was hoping that she would be making comments on this, right? And in fact, I think she was. I just wasn't smart enough to pick up on that. And so it's really making sure that we have that moment to attribute that meaning. And then when I wasn't seeing it, then I'm like, well, let me show you, let me do some more things over here. And so she has really taught me a lot on how to make sure that I walk that walk of saying that I presume competence, I presume potential, and I believe you. I believe that you are competent, and I know you have something to say. And so I am going to honor all of those communication attempts. So here, it was a really great example of some things to do and a bunch of things not to do. And not really that assigning and honoring all communication attempts is so important. And I missed the boat on that. So let's see if I redeem myself over here. This is where my friend gets a little bit more ornery. He's not happy with me.
Nice looking, Callie. Do you have something to say?
Don't need.
The good witch is pointing. You're looking around. The good witch is pointing to. You're right. She's pointing to the wicked witch that is under the house. Is that what you were gonna tell me? She was pointing to the wicked witch. Yes. Oh, because of the tornado. You're right. You looked here at this group, then you looked over here at yellow. And because of the tornado. Good job, Callie.
So giving her another opportunity, you know, one of the things that Car and the crowd talk about is doing it one time. And then let me just go back.
What happened?
Oh, let's just press pause on all the things are happening here. Having that moment of making that comment, having that wait, responding, and then moving on to the next page. And I think that during some of this initial teaching of you how to interact, how to participate, especially, you know, I'm working with, in this situation, you know, she's in first grade, so hasn't had a lot of opportunities to really do that yet. So taking that moment, and sometimes we spend a little extra time on that page so that we can explore all of the things that she might want to say. And as we know, sometimes with Rets, that takes a little bit longer. Or with other significant disabilities, that may take a little bit extra time. So her friend was not happy that it was taking her extra time, but we need to learn how to be patient and to give our friends time when they have something to say. So, okay. Here was during an interactive read aloud. We are doing this activity of print referencing. We were working on their letters and then finding them within the story and finding those really main important letters that were important to them and letters that we had worked with in their working with letters activities that they were doing for their phonemic awareness and phonics. And then here is putting this crowd in an example of kind of completion. So I started in, which is sentence starters, right? And those sentence frames. So they're in like asking these questions, a green city, you know, the city is, giving them a bunch of different multiple ways, multiple sentences that they could use. They didn't have to answer all of them, but perhaps there was one that they really wanted to talk about. And I didn't have a sentence or a completion for them to use. So I really like to give them some options. And we use that crowd. So one of the things, I'm going to go back, that I realized when I was, I've been using CAR and crowd for a while, couple years now. And I always felt very frustrated and like I just wasn't doing it right, and that I didn't know how to get all of the crowds in. So I'm gonna just go back. How to get all of these pieces in. Completion, recall, open-ended, a WH question, and distance. How am I putting the crowd, all of these pieces into CAR? And I just felt like that was really hard for me. And then when I was reading through that book, Comprehensive Literacy for All, and then also reading again the instructions within Readtopia, and they're like, just one, just pick one. You don't have to do them all. Not for every single page. And I don't know, everybody else probably knew this except for me, but I felt like I feel this like huge urgency to give my students opportunities and give them everything. And so that urgency made me feel like I needed to make sure that I was hitting all the crowds in all of these pieces into every page. And once I realized that I could break that apart, and maybe one page does better of focusing on the pictures, one has better at making that distance, right? Of building that bridge between the text and self, right? And then, or maybe then one page, like what happened? Like when a house falls on a person, on a witch, that's pretty important. That recall, that made more sense than maybe doing a completion at that point. So not every page and every story of putting it into the crowd has to go into that. And that was, it was good for me to take that moment and step back and say, it's okay. We can, if we get one and we do one really well, that is where we're at. So one part of crowd goes into CAR. Okay. I'm afraid that my video didn't get in, and I really want to show that. So I think I have that video in a YouTube. So at the end of this, I'll show you guys this one. So, because it was super great. So while we were working and doing our work with vocabulary, and I used the EET tool, which is the expanding expression tool, to build that expressive language and build that in receptive and build that vocabulary. And it's a really nice organizational tool to do that. So we were building heart. I had the heart beating in the background to give us that kind of sense of like, what does it look like? What do we hear? How could we describe that? What words could we use? Then one of the activities in the interactive read aloud that we did was listen for that word within our writing, within the story. So we did an activity, we cut out hearts, And then as the text to speech, and we were using our click to speak and modeling the assistive technology tools, as that was going, then the students had to raise their heart. And they did such a great job. They were so invested and so excited to get ready, and they were listening for that word within the context, within the author's message, and within the writing that we were having read and we were reading. And it just, what a simple, quick, fun little thing to really get them, our students, involved and listening and really finding and responding to that text. And if I can get that video up and running, I will at the end. Okay. So many things are playing. So I'll do that again, but we have, so this building excitement, we're coming to the end here. Building of excitement, building our vocabulary, builds up participation, so that when we do comment, and then ask, wait, maybe model on their AAC device, and then respond and add more. Boy, I would have maybe said that was green, a big green head. And that's where I am actively modeling on my students' AAC or my companion AAC device, or using their partner assisted scanning with Pod and modeling those tools. So that we can build that participation. And I really should add in here, and I'm seeing how that building the excitement, that building the vocabulary, you know, having that structured input of car, adding one piece of crowd into the car that then builds active participation. And I think that's pretty important for us for our students to have that active participation rather than being passive within their reading and in their shared or interactive reading. So these were just a couple more examples. We did some technology.
What show they what?
Where we took videos and made everybody green. And then we also, this was during the play, we had our big head, and then we had the projected them saying what do they want onto the big head.
Who dares to see the great Oz? What do they want?
Which was super great. So even our students who use AAC, they built these messages that we had been working on and within our writing, so that they could then be videoed as well and be put on to the Great Wizard of Oz.
Who dares to see the great Oz? What do they want?
And the kids loved, and it was really fun because it cycled through all of the students. So everyone got to be the Wizard of Oz. We had many, many Dorothys. We have lots of different witches. So everybody got to be part of that. So we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be having active participation in shared reading. We wouldn't have active engagement and active commenting if we hadn't modeled language and our students' preferred systems to them. You need words to use words. If you want a symbol talker, you need to be a symbol talker too. Our students require, and I've done many webinars on modeling and what that looks like. They require so much input, and to be able to have that modeled to them so that they are active users and understand how communication with symbolic communication is so important and can be used. It's modeled and modeled and modeled. And I love this. My friend Steffi We have been modeling to her for years, and her speech and language pathologist and I were talking and just finishing up our session, what our next steps were going to be with her. And we were talking, she just took it upon herself and she decided that our scarecrow, who is our favorite character in our room, needed to learn how to communicate using symbols, and because he was also nonverbal. And so how could she help him? And she started modeling to him of all the words that he could use. And it was the most beautiful moment. And I think every presentation that I talk about shared reading or modeling, writing, anything about AAC, I'll probably use this because it was so brilliant. And it didn't just happen. It was taught. She had lots of experience of people saying, this is important. This matters. This is worthy of our time to show you. You deserve to have your language modeled. And she also saw that importance, and then saw her friend in need, our beautiful scarecrow that was in need of some modeling, and then became a modeler as well. And that just was a beautiful moment. It took years to get here, but we got here. So don't give up. Model, model, model. And like my friend Steffi is even to a scarecrow. Okay, I have this, like I said, I had learned quite a bit of that whole attributing meaning and honoring all communication attempts, and how I feel that is really walking the walk of saying that we presume competence, and we presume and have that foundation that our students have a lot to say, and we believe in them. And so I had described this last week as well, but I just feel like it was so important. I wanted to do it again, that, when we were talking about and describing throne, my friend Lisa here just kept insisting that it was birthday. And so at first we were a little stumped, but we're like, we're going to get there. We believe you. We know that what you're saying is right. And so we checked for clarification, is this what you were saying? Were you saying birthday? And she's like, yes, birthday. And she went back there again, did the icon sequence, and we said, okay, so birthdays, let's talk about this. Thrones are very special. Not everybody sits in a throne. Birthdays are also very special. And she just lit up, and we're like, are you saying that the throne is special like a birthday? Yes. Do you have a special place where you sit at home when it's your birthday? Yes. So you have a throne at home for your birthday that everyone gets to sit in. Yes, birthdays are special. And if we wouldn't have taken, if I wouldn't have learned that lesson from my friend Callie, and taken and really made sure that every word that is there, that we honor and we help and say all communication attempts are worthy of us to take a pause and us figure them out. Like, if we wouldn't have done that, we would have lost that special moment. And then her really, like, she had something to say. So the same thing with heart. She didn't know where heart was on her Tucker. She couldn't find it. And so she went to something she did know. And I'm hoping this plays.
So, like, she picked heart. Like, it was a Valentine's heart.
You're right. She made a connection, didn't she? Maybe she didn't know where heart was on her talker, but she knew where Valentine was. And that to her made a connection.
Valentine.
Yeah, Lisa. Wow, that's so smart.
So, like,
I love that her friends in the class were able to also start seeing and believing, because we were believing in her, that was happening and that she had something to say. And so I love that she went and found Valentine for that when describing the heart. Here's some list of some resources and things that I used. And also these reading modules, I do want to just kind of take us here to Project Core. I love sharing these out with my paraeducators that when they have a little bit of time, if their student is gone for the day or ill, and I have an opportunity to do some PD, some professional development, that I have them come in and do these modules. And there's quite a few that are these self-directed modules. And I love that you can also do them as facilitated. So I love the Project Core. There's lots and lots of resources out there. So please take a minute to go and look at them. And then just thank you. I appreciate you being here today. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you.